Or what did that person say? I will try to do a better job of repeating at least the essential elements that are necessary to follow the line of the argument. But sometimes we get carried away, and I forget that I'm also talking to the home audience. Okay. Good to see everybody. I hope that everybody's able to find a seat. We are going to tackle one of the more difficult sections of Torah today. I know I say that just about every week. But this week we are delving into Parashat Tisa. And Tisa is challenging for a lot of reasons. It has one of the most famous incidents for this period of leaving Egypt. It has a very shiny guest star, namely?
The shiny guest star.
The shiny guest star, exactly. Who's our shiny, well-polished guest star? The golden calf. The golden calf, okay? It's our shiny guest star. It's, it'd be on the also starring in this week's episode, the Egel HaZahav, the golden calf. The golden calf is extremely perplexing as stories go, because where are we in the narrative of the Exodus? What's happened so far?
We are not happy.
Well, we're not happy. Well, we're complaining a little bit, but give me the general overview, right? We used to live in Egypt, right? And now we're at the bottom of Mount Sinai. What's happened between that? A lot of miracles. We got all those plagues. We got the crossing of the sea. We got the Ten Commandments. We've got manna. We've got water coming out of rocks. What's that?
Building the Mishkan.
Building the Mishkan, although there's a debate of whether or not the instructions for the Mishkan came before or after the incident with the golden calf. But at the very least, we have had an unparalleled front row, almost on the stage experience of God that has just been tremendous. Impactful would be an understatement. I think that one of the things I hear from many people these days is they wish they could have a miracle. They wish they could feel God's presence. They wish they could, touch and sense God the same way that our ancestors did when they left Egypt. And everybody sort of feels that if they did, that everything would be better. Their spirituality would just be blown open to a whole new avenue of experiences, that they would never doubt God again. They would never do anything wrong again, because once you have a moment in your life like that, bam, you're set for life. Except for the golden calf. What happens with the golden calf? Why are we making a golden calf? I don't mean rhetorically in terms of the rightness of the act. What actually do the people think they are doing with this thing?
Making a god.
Making a god. No. No. So this is the movie version, unfortunately, that has crept into our understanding of the text. When the Israelites demand the golden calf, they do not think they are making a new god. They think they are making our God. They think they are making Adonai. They think they are making the God that took them out of Egypt. They think they are making a representation, a statue of our God that they can then worship. They're not going after Zeus. They're not going after Baal. They're not going after Marduk or Ishtar or some other pagan god. They think this is the God that they've been dealing with for all of this time.
But they've already gotten the Ten Commandments, which says don't make a graven image.
But they'd already been told not to make idols, whether of God or any other god. Obviously, other gods is compounding the error, but even making idols of God is a problem. So why are they doing it? They've just been told not to. They don't believe that God has turned their back on them. They just believe Moses has disappeared a bit long. So why are they doing what God has told them not to do?
I think it's because they grew up in this culture and everyone everyone in the world was worshiping idols. Therefore, it's just second nature to create an idol-like structure. And especially when Moses was gone, he went up to ascend the mountain, and they thought that maybe he died or something. And so they needed almost a replacement for Moses as well.
They needed something physical. Moses had been their physical conduit to God. Now Moses was gone, so they turned to the more common examples that they were used to and probably more comfortable with from Egyptian society, which was making a statue of something and using that as your physical representation, your physical conduit to God. Did you?
Well, why a calf? Why a calf, not something else?
Why a cow as opposed to something else is a whole nother story, and one that I'm afraid might derail this conversation. I just want to talk about the physicality of it, the feeling that they wanted something they could look at and say, "This is my God."
But why a cow?
Another day. We can talk about the cow another day. I'm sorry, but specifically, they were looking for something. They were looking for something. And
We have a phrase, I'll believe it when I see it.
I'll believe it when I see it. Now they'd seen everything God had done, and they didn't need a statue when all those other things were being done, and yet there was still a drive to want to see it. Yes?
They had not yet received the Ten Commandments.
They had almost certainly received the Ten Commandments by this point.
Page 442.
Okay, 'cause I was
For those who
gonna
are
say,
keeping score.
Before that, they didn't know that they shouldn't have a graven image.
Possibly, correct. But this is definitely after that.
Well, maybe they, like you said, they wanted something physical, but like Moses was not there, so now they needed instruction. They needed something to sacrifice or something to pray to get direction.
Something to look at, get direction, to feel that it was there leading them. And you know what? Moses wanted that too. I'm going to leave it on that controversial statement as we start reading. Okay? But before we badmouth our ancestors too much for the crime they committed, and it was definitely a sin, let's understand the drive that they were feeling is one that we share, and so did Moses. Okay? So we're going to be looking at chapter 33, which is after the incident of the golden calf. God is rather ticked off, and he and Moses are having a little discussion. Okay, so we're on chapter 33 of the book of Exodus, Shemot. This is page 536 if you are in the Eitz Chaim Chumash. Chapter 33, who wants to take us from the bottom of the page there? Got so many people in the room and everyone's shy.
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Set out from here, you and the people that you have brought up from the land of Egypt, to the land of which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, to your offspring will I give it. I will send an angel before you, and I will drive out the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey, but I will not go in your midst, since you are a stiff-necked people, lest I destroy you on the way."
All right, so God is saying, we're going to compromise. Because I can see that even just days after the Ten Commandment, you're already disobeying me and building this golden thing. I'm still going to be with you, sort of. I'm not going to wipe you out like I thought I might. But I will not be amongst you. I will not be traveling with you. You'll be going kind of on your own. You'll have this angel, which is a rather vague term, but you're going to be getting, you're not going to be getting the full God treatment. It's sort of the equivalent of saying, on today's tour, you will be accompanied by the under vice secretary of the company, not the CEO. You know, it was going to be the CEO, but you guys showed that you can't handle it. And if you're going with the CEO, you got to be perfect. And if you're not going to be perfect, the CEO is going to kick you out. So we'll send you with the under vice secretary, and he'll take care of you. And the people say, oh, that's so much better. So much easier, right? No, what do the people say?
When the people heard this harsh word, they went into mourning, and none put on his finery.
Now, recognize, what was the harsh word? He still said, I'm sending you to the land is full of milk and honey. That sounds good to me. What's the harshness? He called them stiff-necked, and that's why he's not going with them. And that is what they're upset about. Okay? The people want God. They want to be as close to God as humanly possible, and God just told them, no, I'm scaling back my plans. And that's bumming them out, to use the California vernacular. Okay? Keep going.
The Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelite people, you are a stiff-necked people. If I were to go in your midst for one moment, I would destroy you. Now then, leave off your finery, and I will consider what to do to you. So the Israelites remained stripped of the finery from Mount Horeb on.
Okay? So we're sort of in a holding pattern for a little bit. Keep going.
Now Moses would take the tent and pitch it outside the camp at some distance from the camp. It was called the tent of meeting, and whoever sought the Lord would go out to the tent of meeting that was outside the camp. Whenever Moses went out to the tent, all the people would rise and stand, each at the entrance of his tent, and gaze after Moses until he had entered the tent. And when Moses entered the tent, the pillar of cloud would descend and stand at the entrance of the tent while he spoke with Moses. When all the people saw the pillar of cloud poised at the entrance of the tent, all the people would rise and bow low, each at the entrance of his tent. The Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one man speaks to another, and he would then return to the camp. But his attendant, Joshua son of Nun, a youth, would not stir out of the tent.
Okay. Good and clear? Okay. Well, we get a little glimpse here of what is going to take place. Right? We've got what we had was this whole notion, pardon my artistry, of Mount Sinai, right? And from Mount Sinai we had the cloud that represented God's glory and God's presence, right? And then you had all of the people, it's my group stick figures, and they were able to experience God in this moment, right? The so-called theophany, the experience of God, the giving of the Ten Commandments. And the people were scared, but they were also drawn to this experience. Make sense? Well, this is going to be replaced as we leave, because we don't get to live at Mount Sinai forever, right? And God is saying there's going to be this Mishkan, and again, pardon my artistry, and that's supposed to be a tent held down. Sorry. And inside the tent, Moses and I, that's Moses' staff, Moses and I are going to talk. And while that's happening, everyone else will be standing up outside. Make sense? What's the difference between these two experiences?
God is only talking to Moses.
Yeah, this massive theophany cloud experience for everybody is now going to be right in here. Just going on right there. And even though the people were afraid and said, Moses, you go because we can't handle it, they seem disappointed by the resolution. On the plus side, however, it does mean that God's presence is going to be a lot closer than Mount Sinai will be to them when they start traveling.
So is this what God meant by I'm not going to be among you, but I'm only going to talk to Moses, or is this, it seems inconsistent?
It does seem inconsistent. I personally believe this is meant to be like a compromise. I'm not going to be with you like this, just all fire and cloud and sound and thunder day in, day out for everybody, because that level of experience will result in you guys being wiped out. You can't even hold back from making a golden cow for 40 days. But I'm not going to leave you entirely alone either. I will come inside the Mishkan. My presence will be felt because that will be such a protected zone by having the Holy of Holies and the rest of the Mishkan and then the courtyard and then the Levites that we'll find out later are surrounding it. That cordoning off system will make sure that nobody experiences the pure essence of God, that face-to-face experience, who should.
That's assuming God has a face.
Well, yeah, what do we make of that phrase?
Exactly. That's a personification of God. which-
Is it a personification of God? Is it an anthropomorphism to say that God and Moses spoke face to face?
Yeah. In my mind, it is.
Certainly sounds that way when we translate it so literally, right? If I say I talked to my brother face to face, wouldn't you assume we were in the same room looking at each other?
Yes.
Yeah. We're going to wrestle with that. So thank you for getting us on the right track. But I wanted to make sure that we understood that there was this notion of something about the presence of God that was still going to be traveling. But let's keep going because we got some heavy duty stuff to get through. But I want to get a little more Torah under our belt first. Judy, you want to keep going?
Sure. Moses said to the Lord, "See, you say to me, lead this people forward, but you have not made known to me whom you will send with me. Further you have said, I have singled you out by name, and you have indeed gained my favor. Now, if I have truly gained your favor, pray let me know your ways, that I may know you and continue in your favor. Consider too that this nation is your people." And he said, "I will go in the lead and will lighten your burden." And he said to him, "Unless you go in the lead, do not make us leave this place. For how shall it be known that your people have gained your favor unless you go with us, so that we may be distinguished, your people and I, from every people on the face of the earth?"
All right, so Moses is upping the ante a little bit here. He's saying, you've got to let your presence be felt more if you want your people to truly be distinguished by your presence. And I know that that's risky, but, you know, that kind of is what it means to say that this nation is your people. So you gotta back up that claim by coming with us. And God answers,
And the Lord said to Moses, "I will also do this thing that you have asked.
okay. Okay, we'll find a way to make it work.
For you have truly gained my favor, and I have singled you out by name."
And then Moses pushes his luck.
He said, "Oh, let me behold your presence." And he answered, "I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim before you the name
Lord.
Lord,
Which would be Adonai, right?
and the grace that I grant, and the compassion that I show. But," he said, "you cannot see my face, for man may not see me and live." And the Lord said, "See, there is a place near me. Station yourself on the rock, and as my presence passes by, I will put you in a cleft of the rock and shield you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will take my hand away, and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen."
What does Moses want?
See God.
To see God more.
Sounds Disney.
He wants to see God more than he has. He wants to truly apprehend, to truly come into contact with God's glory in the most first-hand possible way. And God says,
Not exactly.
well, I'm not sure I can do that for you. Because, why not? Why does God not let Moses get it?
Humans are too vulnerable.
Because you can't see my face and live. If I show you me, then you will die. It seems to be the implication. Make sense? Oh, please. What about verse 11 we just read?
They talk face to face.
They talk face to face in the tent. They talk face to face in the tent. And now 20 verses later, God's saying you can't see my face. No? What's going on here? Can you or can you not see God?
But when you're talking to somebody and you're blindfolded, you're still talking face to face.
Are you?
I think so.
When I talk to my brother on Skype, am I talking to him face to face?
Yeah. I
In
think so.
some sense.
In some sense? Maybe. If I talk to him on the phone, am I talking to him face to face? So wait. If I'm in the same room but blindfolded, that counts as face to face. But if I'm on the phone, that's not face to face? What, is there some magic that comes from having the actual vibrations moved by his vocal cords that counts as face to face?
You're in the same place.
Okay.
You're face to face, physically face to face. But that doesn't mean you necessarily can see them.
So if I'm talking on the phone to somebody who's in another part of the room, does that count as face to face? We're in the same room, we're just not talking like this, we're talking on phones, or, as I've seen too many times, texting to each other in the same room.
Then you're teenagers.
Then you're teenagers.
That's a whole other category.
And that's a whole other category. And thank God I'm not a teenager now. It's far too complicated.
By actually being able to see the person, whether it's physical or over the internet, you're seeing what you say and the reaction he has. Did he smile? Did he get angry? Did he furrow his brow? So you get to feel more that what you're saying is being understood.
So face-to-face may be implying that there is a greater understanding of the partner in the conversation than when you only hear the words. That just getting the words is an incomplete experience, an incomplete exchange of information, an incomplete understanding compared to seeing the person. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Do we have to
Yes.
take these words so literally? If this exchange is
Mhm.
true, couldn't we say soul to soul? Couldn't face to face not mean?
Not mean actually having nose and cheeks and eyes and such like that. Yes and no. That is to say, do we have to take the words face to face, meaning there were two fleshy objects with noses and eyes pressed against each other? Absolutely not. But do we have to account for what the Torah was trying to tell us by that phrase in some significant way other than just they were talking, which seems to happen all over the place? We have to account for it. As you say, soul to soul may be a good accounting for it. But we need to wrestle with unpacking the literal words face to face in a more meaningful way. So yes, we do definitely need to do something.
I was thinking that maybe like the Creator only know the heart, so Moses' heart was like in the same place as how the Creator wanted him to be, and he wasn't so easily to turn aside like other people are this. So when he said we need to face to face, that his views and his laws which he wanted Moses to comment to them, he had in the heart to do.
So what you're saying is face-to-face may have meant more of a harmony between Moses and God than between God and everyone else, as we see by everyone else's behavior.
Yeah.
So when it says that God spoke to Moses face-to-face, it may have meant they were on the same wavelength. We might say in modern English.
Yeah.
Interesting idea. Okay, let's take a look. Oh, Nikki, one more comment, and then we'll hit some commentaries.
The word is remain, and it's used in both instances,
So whatever way we try to understand face-to-face is going to have to be accounted for with the phrase, no one can see my face. Either we're going to say face-to-face is a unique idiom and has nothing to do with not see my face and live, or there's something that's equivalent in terms of the idiom of face in both phrases, and we'll wrestle with it then. Well, let's take a look at some commentary and see where we can go, but before we get to the commentary, we need to see how many people get to see God, okay, and what it means to see God and experience God. So we got our quote right up there at the top, which says, you cannot see my face, for anyone, no one can see my face and live. And then we had the quote that we already saw back in verse 11, which said, the Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one man speaks to another. These seem to be mutually contradictory, and as I pointed out, they're only 9 verses apart. And don't tell me that someone just didn't notice that they had, put together 2 different opinions. It's not really that plausible in my opinion. Now, Sforno gives us a very quick and, we'll decide whether it's a satisfactory explanation, that what it means by speaking face to face was that Moses was still in full possession of his senses during the experience. What would that imply to you?
Was it a vision?
What's that?
It was not a vision.
It
fact, he actually spoke and saw one of them.
Moses wasn't in a vision state. He wasn't in a dream state. He wasn't in a trance or some transcendental state of mind. He was aware of reality and himself and everything going on, and yet was still able to connect to God the same way I can talk to you without being in a state of trance or dream or whatever. And that was a unique relationship for Moses, and that everyone else was in some altered state when they encounter God.
Could it be that Moshe was like in a more spiritual, in a high spiritual level, that he could connect with the Creator, whereas the people that were more on the physical?
Certainly there's an elevation of Moses in this phrase, that Moses had unique attributes that allowed him to encounter God differently than the rest of us. It's trying to peel away the language to find out what that difference was that we're going to wrestle with. Exactly. Okay, so let me just, in the interest of time, take us through the few more examples here. So earlier on in Exodus, when we had done that whole 10 Commandments thing, it says, "Then Moses and Aaron and Nadab and Abihu and the 70 elders of Israel ascended," meaning they went up a bit of Mount Sinai, "and they saw the God of Israel. Under his feet there was the likeness of a pavement of sapphire, like the very sky for purity. Yet he did not raise his hand against the leaders of the Israelites. They beheld God, and they ate and drank." We normally sort of skip over that sentence, don't we? What does that seem to imply? That they got to see God. And they didn't die. All right, so just 6 chapters earlier, this is chapter 24 for those who are playing at home. It seems that a whole bunch of people got to see God. And they even, got to see that there was what the floor looked like where he was. Okay. Well, let's take another example, a bit more famous, from the prophet Ezekiel. Above the expanse over their heads, meaning over the heads of the angels that he had seen, was the semblance of a throne, in appearance like sapphire, and on top, upon the semblance of the throne, there was the semblance of a human form. From what appeared as his loins up, I saw a gleam as of ember, what looked like a fire encased in a frame. And from what appeared as his loins down, I saw what looked like fire. There was a radiance all about him, like the appearance of the bow which shines in the clouds on a day of rain. Such was the appearance of the surrounding radiance. That was the appearance of the semblance of the presence of the Lord. When I beheld it, I flung myself down on my face, and I heard the voice of someone speaking. Well, that's pretty descriptive. Not only do we know that he saw God, we know what God looks like from the waist up and from the waist down, and we know what the shimmering lights all around God look like. I mean, we're halfway to being able to draw a portrait. Shouldn't, just make sure we got that clear, right? we wouldn't set out, but doesn't that sound a lot more descriptive? I mean, poor Moses only got to see the back of God, and here Ezekiel is seeing God in enough clarity and detail to describe the above the waist and below the waist and the surrounding lights.
The key word is semblance.
What's that? The key word is semblance.
Yes.
You can cover a lot of sins with the word semblance. It kind of sort of looked like, so maybe this isn't actually what God looked like, but simply the best that Ezekiel can do to describe what he saw. But he still seems to be fairly confident that he saw something quite distinct.
It sounds like he was in a trance.
Well, it certainly sounds different than most things than most of us see when we're not in altered states of reality. Absolutely. Were you going to?
Yeah, I was saying that to that, maybe in Ezekiel's description, like you were saying before, since no one has seen the Creator, so in a physical form, you can describe it in a physical form because that's his interpretation of how he sees the Creator.
So it might have been his interpretation of what he saw, rather than the actual thing-ish that he saw, at the risk of using the word thing to describe God. So English is a clumsy language sometimes. All right, well, we got another very famous vision of God, which comes from the prophet Isaiah. In the year that King Uzziah died, I beheld my Lord, and by my Lord here he does not mean the king, he means the king, seated on high and lofty throne, and the skirts of his robe filled the temple. Seraphs, a type of angel, stood in attendance on him. Each of them had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his legs, and with 2 he would fly. And one would call to the other, Kadosh, 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 the very famous line, Holy, 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 the Lord of hosts, his presence fills all the earth. So here, Isaiah seems to be looking out at the Temple Mount, and he can see God sitting on a giant throne, and his skirts, the robes that he's wearing, flow down and fill the temple. Pretty image. Beautiful. And all around are these 6-winged angels that are calling out to each other, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Again, that's a lot more detail than Moses seems to get. I mean, nowhere in the Torah does it say, and Moses saw God, and God was resplendent, and this, that, or the other. It's the only time we get any language like that is when we have the 70 elders with him, where we get his feet and likeness in the paving stones. But when Moses is talking about God, we just get face to face. That's it. No robes, no swooping angels, no flashy lights, nothing. Challenging? Good. Just one little tidbit, because it's just a great idea of how the rabbis thought. They asked the question of, why is it that Isaiah, who lived in Jerusalem and was there with the temple, seemed to have a less strong view of God than Ezekiel, who was in exile? I mean, Ezekiel has this very elaborate scene of what he's recounting from having seen the king. And Isaiah's is detailed, but it's not nearly as flashy. And their answer, well, what is Ezekiel like? He is like a rural man who saw the king. And what is Isaiah like? He's like an urban man who saw the king. So if you live in the city, the capital city where the king lives, you see the king all the time. He's there at the opening of the shopping mall. He's there at the games. His entourage is going up and down. You see the king all the time. And if you're going to tell someone what the king looks like, you say, yes, he's a wonderful guy. He's tall, he's strong, he wears fancy clothes. Done. But if you go to the king once from the rural hinterlands, and you get to catch a glimpse of the king, when you get back home, oh boy, do you have a story to tell. And you're going to describe the horses, and you're going to describe the trumpets, and you're going to describe, down to the clasps on the shoes. I mean, you're going to just spread out this story into much more detail, because, well, you don't get to see it that often. Just a little tidbit. I'm not sure that it helps us understand our question better, but a little bit of a tidbit here. And I'm just noticing, pardon me, because unlike God, the laptop is not eternal, and I notice the battery is about to die. So I just need to plug that in before catastrophe strikes. All right. Ignore the phrase for Elijah's still small voice. I don't think we're going to have time to go through that. But instead, I want to go for the section here that is taken from Vayikra Rabbah, from the Midrash, which tries to help us understand how it is that Moses, the greatest of all prophets, seems to have a less clear vision of God than the other prophets that come much later. All right, so who'd like to lead us through Vayikra Rabbah? Oh, don't all volunteer at once, thank you.
Rav Pinhas said in the name of Rav Hoshaya.
Up a bit, where it says, what difference is there?
Oh, going up there.
Yes.
Okay. What difference is there between Moses and all other prophets? Rabbi Judah bar Eli, and the rabbis gave different explanations. Rabbi Judah said, through 9 mirrors did the prophets behold visions. This is indicated by what is said, and the appearance of the vision which I saw was like the vision that I saw when I came to destroy the city. And the visions were like the vision that I saw by the river Habah, and I fell upon my face.
All right, so the vision was like the vision of the visions that was like the vision. What are they trying to say about what Ezekiel saw here? Right, this was not a clear vision. This is a like 3rd, 4, 5, or 9 level obscured image of what actually was taking place. If I set up a series of 9 mirrors in a room, and I've got a person standing here and a person standing here, and they're perfectly aligned, if you look in the mirror to see that other person, how good is that image going to be? It's going to be distorted, especially if you remember the fact that the idea of glass mirrors with silver backing had not been invented yet. So when we talk about mirrors, what the rabbis are really talking about is really, really, really polished metal. So imagine going through 9 levels of really, really polished metal. How good of an image are you going to get? Not so much. You know, all of those cop shows notwithstanding, where they do the, enhance down here on this reflective knob, which is reflecting from that, doohickey on the roof over there, which is reflecting in someone's cornea back over here. You can't actually do that. You can't just keep zooming in on layers of reflections. The image degrades as it is reflected from one to the next. And so by this idea of Ezekiel and the other prophets saw God through 9 mirrors, what they're trying to say is that their vision of God was imperfect, was reduced. A lot better than what the rest of us poor schlemiels can ever possibly hope to accomplish. I don't want to disparage the prophets. Certainly their vision of God is many, 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 many hundreds of times clearer than ours. But it still is not a perfect understanding and vision of God. On the other hand, Marion?
But Moses beheld visions through one mirror, as it is said, with him do I speak, in a vision and not in dark speeches.
But Moses got only 1 layer between him and God, which is a marked improvement, exponential improvement, I think we would say. All right, but there's another way to look at this, and giving similarly a similar idea. Keep reading.
The rabbi said, all the other prophets beheld prophetic visions through a blurred mirror, as it is said, and I have multiplied visions, and by the ministry of the prophets have I used similitudes. All
right, similitudes, one of those great English words, but it was exactly as was pointed out just earlier, coming back to this notion of the important word is semblance. Okay, the prophets understood that what they were seeing was the best that they could understand of what God was able to show them. But it was not a perfect one-to-one accurate representation of reality. But it was the best that God could give them. Make sense? And then they had to do their best to understand it. On the other hand, Moses.
But Moses beheld prophetic visions through a polished mirror, as it is said, the similitude of the Lord does he behold.
All right, so Moses, on the other hand, gets a much cleaner picture. All right, now you might wonder, though, because from what we've just seen, it still sounded like Ezekiel and Isaiah gave a much more detailed picture of God. I mean, if we were doing police sketch artists here to try and draw what they had seen, don't you think we'd have a lot better chance of drawing the suspect based on Isaiah and Ezekiel than we would based on Moses's?
That's how we got thousands of years of wrong art.
That's how we got thousands of years of wrong art. A very good observation. But Tanakh itself seems to give that impression. I mean, you can't just blame the artists.
I respectfully disagree. I think that Moses' experience of God was much purer than that of the prophets. Moses' requests of God were much more daily issues. The subject of his interactions with God were on much more basic daily matters. With the prophets, sorry to say, the Jews are messing up. You gotta get them back on the right path.
A different type of conversation.
The nature, right. The nature of the conversation was different. So I believe was the experience of having prophecy in a dream, or what other people have said in the past, not in a completely conscious state. might lead one to have very descriptive, flowery ways of expressing what God is and what God is like. Moses didn't have it. Moses didn't need it.
Ironically and counterintuitively to most of us, but still very, very true, a lack of clear vision lends itself to more elaboration. The less we can see clearly, the more likely we are to expand upon what we thought we did see. All right? Let me give you a very quick example that you can verify tonight when you run out and look up in the sky. All right? We've just about got a full moon because Purim just finished, so we're on the downswing for the month. But has anyone ever seen the man in the moon or the rabbit in the moon? Right? I know we still got a lot of haze and light and all of that, but the moon we can still see, even if we can't always see the stars. When Neil Armstrong went to the moon, did he see the rabbit or the man in the moon? Why not? Why can we see it and he can't? He's closer.
He was right up on it.
He had too good a view of the moon. He could see the exact craters, he could see the exact dirt and the rock as he flew overhead and then stand in them when he was walking on the surface of it. He saw the moon for what it truly was. Whereas we, Porsche the Meals down here, we're looking up at the moon and we get a kind of fuzzy, depending upon your prescription, view of the moon at all, and we make pictures out of the shadows. And we say that kind of sort of looks like a rabbit. It kind of sort of looks like a face. Well, that's what our prophets did. They saw through their blurred vision, which was, as I said, the best that they could possibly do and a lot better than what we can achieve. They saw something of God's essence. But it was so blurred, so refracted, that they had to compare it to something else they knew. And of course, the most magnificent thing that they knew were earthly kings. And so they used the language of royalty to try and describe the greatness that was on the edge of their vision, to be able to possibly convey the feeling that they had from that experience. Whereas Moses didn't have to be abstract and artistic, as you put it, in his description of God. He saw God. Not face, like cheeks, nose, ears. He saw the essence of God as directly as any human possibly can. We're going to unpack that last phrase in just a second. Okay? Does that make sense? Good? Yes? No? Maybe? Yep.
What I have trouble understanding is why...
There's only one thing.
Yeah. Why God put so much into his relationship with Moses and not into like the 70 elders, a larger group, not a big group, a larger group of really prominent, intelligent, moral, decent people. And if God was dealing with 100 people who were then dealing with the masses, it seems like there would be better communication and better teaching than just the single Moses trying to direct the masses.
If you were in a position to pick your witnesses for a crime, would you rather have a police detective at the scene of the crime as it's happening, who is able to observe what happens, or would you rather have 1,000 of us? Who would you rather? You'd want the experienced detective, because the quality of information that he will give you is going to be far greater than the mass of jumbled and inaccurate information that you would get from 1,000 of the rest of us. There are some things you can crowdsource. There are some things that Wikipedia does really, really well. But when you need specialized abilities and skills, like being able to stand in God's presence, as we're going to see in just a second, you need the right person for the job. And just having more people is not going to yield better results, because they have to be more of the right people. And apparently, according to our sages and according to our experience of history, there's only been one right person, and that was Moses. Now, this was also very important just structurally for our faith, because if we were waiting continually to have people who could have that experience that we felt was equivalent to Moses' experience, then you leave the door open for continually upending and uprooting the Torah. because you wait for the next guy who gives you, well, I saw God, and God told me X, and all of a sudden we're now just changing the revelation every other day. And believing as an article of faith, which is indeed one of the 13 principles of Rambam's faith, that Moses was the clearest, had the clearest view and understanding of God of any of the prophets, is a very important foundation for keeping Judaism as Judaism, rather than just changing by whoever comes along as a poetic speaker. All right, so let's try and figure out what a human being actually can do in God's presence. So we've got a very famous section here from Hagiga 14b, which deals with 4 guys going into Pardes. And Pardes is a mystical euphemism for the transcendent realm. Not necessarily in heaven itself, although maybe, depending upon how you want to interpret it. But it certainly means that they were entering into a different level of experience of God, beyond the normal workaday kind of things that we do. You think you feel moved by your prayers? That's not Pardes. This is well above and beyond that experience. So who'd like to read? Please.
Our rabbis have taught 4 entered into the Pardes. They were Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, Acher, Elisha ben Abuya.
That's his name. He became known as Acher, which means the other, but his real name was Elisha ben Abuya.
And Rabbi Akiva. Ben Azai gazed and died. Of him it is written, precious in the eyes of God is the death of his pious ones. Ben Zoma gazed and went insane. Of him it is written, have you found honey, eat your share, lest you become full and vomit it up. Acher became an apostate. Rabbi Akiva entered and exited in peace.
Okay. Good and clear, isn't it? Like all mystical traditions. All right. We got 4 guys who have the same type of mystical experience, 4 very different reactions. All right. So we've got Ben, make sure we get this in the right order. We got Ben Azai, who looks at God in some way and dies. The received wisdom of that is that Ben Azai was someone who had a tenuous connection to this world anyway. He was someone who tended to float in a spiritual realm above most of his peers. When he gazed and felt connected to God, that connection to this world just didn't matter. It was gone. And so why would he stick around? I mean, it's like, hey, I'm ready for this now, and the world, holds nothing for me. Whereas Ben Zoma was someone who, although brilliant and wise, was not prepared to truly digest all that he was experiencing from this experience. And as such, his brain couldn't hold it, and he went crazy. But there is a limit to how much a mind, even a great mind, can understand of the experience of God when reaching this level. And if you're not properly prepared, it can break your brain. Whereas Acher, and then the image, of course, there is of eating so much honey that you end up throwing up. And of course, when you throw up, you don't just throw up the thing that made you sick, do you? You empty the contents. Now think of it as mentally vomiting. You try to take in too much of God into your brain, and you end up losing everything that was in there already. You empty the contents of your brain. Acher became an apostate. Lots of different theories of what it actually was that he saw and why he became someone who rejects Torah after this experience. One interpretation is that he felt that he was now able to connect to God in this way, and he didn't need this way. That he didn't need the regular day-to-day doing the mitzvahs, living a regular Jewish life. Because, hey, if I can go see God in this transcendent way, what do I need keeping kosher for? What do I need Shabbat for? What do I need Torah for? I've got my, private entrance to God's throne room. I don't need to go through the servants' quarters of doing God's commandments. So that's one theory of what it meant, of why Acher went and left the fold of Judaism. And Rabbi Akiva, he made it out alive and normal. 25% odds among the great Not so good odds, are they? And indeed, our tradition has been very skeptical of this experience. But, to go back to our discussion of the golden calf, but we want it, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to be able to experience God better? Who wouldn't want to be able to understand God better? Who wouldn't want to feel closer to God? But you can't just make your own, as our ancestors did with the golden calf, and you can't leapfrog what is necessary for doing in this world and in the steps of preparation to understand God better. It takes time. It takes a lifetime. But we are blessed with one last quote, also taken from the end of the Vayikra Rabbah quote, that we don't have to despair completely. Paula, since you were already reading, why don't you just finish us off at the bottom of the in this world.
In this world, the Shekhinah manifests itself only to chosen individuals. In the time to come, however, the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all the flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it.
But eventually, we all will get to have that experience. All right, right now, yes, it is tricky to experience it. It is a selective process. It is only through fits and starts and glimpses and tiny little slivers of experience. But at the end of days, in the time to come, we will all be able to understand and connect to God much more than we can at this current time.
Question, is this, why do we need this? Is this the Odyssey argument, explanation of it?
There are elements that do go to this for theodicy, and in fact the phrase, the scene where Moses wants to see God more clearly is often interpreted as being wanting to understand the question of why do bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people, and that the answer is you'll never understand in this world. But I don't believe that's the only relevance to this. I believe that there is also meant to be a combined sense of warning and hope, that the purpose of Judaism is not only to connect us to God in that most intimate of ways that Moses was able to experience. And if you think that by studying Torah and that by living a life of mitzvot, you will in this life have the experience that Moses had, you're wrong. Even the greatest among us from earlier generations, as we see, the track record ain't so good of coming through that experience unharmed. And even the prophets were not able to see God the way Moses did. And if you believe that Torah is only a vehicle for that, then you are essentially using Torah for your own personal spiritual elevation rather than to fulfill it as the commands that God has given us. But on the other hand, if you think that your life will never contain an experience of God, that your life will always be simply doing as you were commanded without having any relationship with the commander, then you were also mistaken. That we can feel the presence of God even if we can't see the presence of God the way Moses did. That we can be outside the tent, so to speak. We can know that God is present, and we can even feel something of the after effects of God's presence in our life. And that's good. And that is part of what Torah can do for us.
But it comes with a price. Like, you can feel it if you're doing the holiness and the righteousness of what experience that today.
Correct. It comes, I wouldn't necessarily say with a price, but it comes with a with effort.
Yeah, with
That-
effort to do the right.
Exactly. And you know, one of the sad things that I've found in much of the 20th century and now the 21st is that many people want the result without the effort. And many people think the result is the goal, as opposed to a secondary aspect of what it means to observe Torah. God did not give us Torah just so we could experience God better. That was not the only reason for giving us Torah. And just as that interpretation of Acher, that he thought he could experience God without the Torah, so why bother with Torah? just as we reject that as a model, I reject too those who believe they can be spiritual without being observant, without caring what they actually do. Just because you can sit in your room and chant something, or open your mind to God and feel a spiritual moment, which is a perfectly fine experience, doesn't mean that the rest of Torah holds nothing for you, and doesn't mean that the commandments aren't still important day in, day out. Because it's not simply about a vehicle of transporting you from this world to that world. It is about transforming this world with you still in it. And that is what Ben Azai missed. Ben Azai used it to transport away. That's not our goal. It can happen in certain instances, but that's not the purpose. The purpose is to take our experience of God and the instructions that God has given us to transform ourselves and this world, and one of the side benefits is having both a better material life as well as a better spiritual life. And the other parts of those experiences, they'll come in the world to come. Isn't that clear? Remember, we're looking through a lot of lenses, a lot of mirrors. One last question.
How does Abraham's relationship with God compare with Moses?
According to the tradition, it was good, but he was no Moses. That everything that he saw was also through vision and through intermediary transmission, whether it be through angels or, like I said, through an altered state. There's even a very it's almost derogatory. I hesitate to say it. There's a quote in the Talmud where it says, but didn't God, or in Vayikra Rabbah, sorry, didn't God talk to Adam? And it says, well, God didn't bother with the sharecropper, because Adam was the tiller of the field. And it says, well, didn't he talk to Noah? Well, God didn't talk to the shepherd. Well, didn't God talk with Abraham? Well, God didn't talk with the innkeeper.
Well, that's it.
Only with Moses. So, not to disparage them completely, but the rabbis were very, very aware that Moses was on a completely different level, and that next to Moses, Abraham just looked like the keeper of the inn. Famous for his hospitality is why they chose as the innkeeper as the title for him. So, the king doesn't bother with the innkeeper. So they did definitely see that Moses was on a completely different spiritual plane than Abraham. And now, for the rest of us, Abraham is at a completely different spiritual level than us. But yes, when we're talking about comparing Abraham to Moses, I'm afraid Abraham comes up a little short.
And you have to remember that with Abraham, like Abraham and the other patriarchs, they were mostly on an individual walk with the Creator. But like Moses was like up to lead the nation.
Yes, Moses had a much bigger job as well.
Much bigger.
Yes, Moses was not merely on an individual spiritual quest, as you put it. He was on a national mission.
Yeah, he was on a mission.
Very good. Keep reading, keep studying, and hope to see everybody on Shabbat.